Hello and good afternoon. I'm Anusha. I'll be moderating this session with the topic of collaboration as a key success factor to achieving smart city goals. With us today, we have our distinguished speakers. First, Mr. Mark Forney, Lead Municipal Finance Specialist for East Asia Pacific. He is a lead specialist at World Bank Vietnam office, where he focused on supporting the East Asia government in the areas of urban and resilience, with emphasizing on improving access to sub-nation finance and supporting low-carbon development, ensuring resilience against climate change and supporting a move towards smart cities. Our second speaker is Mr. Jeffrey Dalmon, Senior Infrastructure Finance Specialist, Infrastructure, Public-Private Partnership and Guarantees, World Bank Singapore. He is a Senior Public-Private Partnership Specialist at the World Bank since 2005, advising globally on infrastructure, finance, and public-private partnership. He is also an author of numerous books and articles on public-private partnership. And our final speaker is Madam Maimuna Jaafar, Director and Lead Technology and Innovation Iskandar Regional Development Authority, IRDA. Madam Maimuna leads the Smart City team in IRDA and Chief Smart City Officer for Johor Bahru in the ASEAN Smart City Network Program Alliance. She is currently in the committee member of Malaysia Green Building Council Southern Chapter to promote energy efficient in buildings and pro-tem member for Malaysia Smart City Alliance, MSCA. She has successfully secured Iskandar Malaysia to become a pilot project for the United Nations Energy Efficient Acceleration Program and promotes and practice sustainable and innovation. For the scene setting for today's topic, in developing a realistic smart city solution that would absolutely benefit both government sector and citizen, it is an entire important to get all government agencies to collaborate and implementing these realistic solutions. It takes approximately creative thinking, persistent, patient, yet collaboration plays the key success factor in turning smart city solution into reality. In creating collaboration, two important steps are crucial: describing collaboration advantage to both sides and accepting everyone to realize the value from the multiple viewpoint. This means innovation of any organization cannot be accomplished through the effort of only one person. It requires the experience, knowledge, and labor of a united team through a single vision. Local authorities, PBTs, face crucial challenge on how they are structuring the governance and creating good collaboration. Collaboration do not just happen eventually, but require clear administration, vision, positive support, and time. This means we must end the culture of working in silo, increasing communication and get collaboration across departments, finding business model, and most important, hearing from the citizen themselves. Because finally, collaboration is the key to achieve realistic smart city solution. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Mark Forney and Mr. Jeffrey Dalmon to present.
Thank you, Anusha. Should I share my screen? Okay, thank you very much for that introduction also. I think there's a really important point to this introduction, which is that the word and ideas about technology weren't really mentioned. And I think that that's fundamental to how we look at smart cities. It's easy to look at a world of vendors and suppliers with really cool technical solutions using state-of-the-art equipment and approaches to analyze data and information. But fundamentally, that's not a smart city. Fundamentally, a smart city is a connected city. And so I'd just like to go through a presentation that gives a few high-level points from our perspective with regards to how we try to scope and frame the approach to smart cities that we're working on together with governments around the world, and then to talk a little bit about a case study of an engagement that we've been supporting the government of Can Tho in Vietnam to put together over the last couple of years. So on the next slide, this is how I see cities. I see cities today on the left. They are really complicated administrative systems, and it's very difficult to understand who says what, who does what, and how different pieces come together to deliver services and to plan and define new investments. This confusion really needs to be streamed out seamlessly, just like you see on the right side. The right side is a smart city because the kinks in the system for communication and for sharing of information to make good decisions have been sorted out. So really, this is what we think about when we think about a smart city. Horizontal and vertical connectedness through data sharing to achieve better planning and transformation, rather than specific technological solutions. On the next slide, what we're trying to break, again, is data silos, because with these data silos, we don't get to benefit from synergies. Different departments across the city government collect and manage the same type of data to have the same information, but it's either done multiple times and not shared, or if it's not shared and there's a lost opportunity in being able to combine the information from different sources to be able to have a better understanding of the city, to be able to better invest and plan and manage that city. On the next slide, I just want to highlight, we try to use examples and case studies of good practice and practice where we can learn some lessons. And I think Korea is known as a very innovative and high-tech government and country, and Seoul is a very high-tech environment. But what's interesting about the smart cities programs in Seoul is that is not really about the technology per se. It's about how they were able to flow information across people, to be able to have an open data plaza, to be able to have citizens respond and use these different data sets to have better information, to make products, and to essentially connect the citizens with the government a little bit more. And again, it's the connectedness, not the technology that Seoul has to offer, that is really what's interesting about their program. On the next slide, we do have, whether this is in Vietnam or countries around the world in which the World Bank works, challenges in delivering strategically in smart city programs at scale. It's very difficult to align the big picture of we want to be smart with what exactly do we need to put in place? What systems do we need to put in place to actually connect when the status quo is silos, and those silos are there for a reason. So aligning the objectives with the actual on the ground elements of getting to that objective is really difficult. And we oftentimes lack the value proofs because from an economic perspective or an economic analysis perspective, we don't necessarily have enough time to have a sufficient body of, let's say, academic knowledge and case studies to be able to demonstrate what the exact returns on those investments are. And more importantly, is the interconnectedness and the interplay between the different types of investments that need to come into place, rather than those investments themselves. Because what does this foundation enable a city to do to better understand and view their city, to plan and invest? And because this is somewhat technical in terms of the activities, it can be difficult to implement at scale. Each city is unique in how they break down silos. They have existing institutional barriers, they have existing relationships and constituencies, And because each is unique, it's not very straightforward to just put in place a series of steps like a menu that you can make to have a smart city. On the next slide, there's a lot of confusion in the market. First, because smart city sells. I've never met a city leader that wants to be in charge of a dumb city. And the communication around smart city is highly effective for the supply side of the market. You have infrastructure companies, you have digital platform companies, tech companies, strategic consultants, all of them are selling business in smart cities. And that means there's a lot of noise and a lot of confusion, and it's hard to sift through and understand what's real and what is of value to the client, which is the city, rather than what is interesting for the sales and supply side to be able to provide. So oftentimes we see cities that are trapped into contracts and engagements that are large ICT engagements with high upfront costs, low upfront costs and high maintenance costs. We see lock-in of technologies that make it difficult for cities to upgrade their systems, and in general is this mist of confusion that is hindering action in many cases, and that emphasis on technology rather than the policies to be able to come together and share and break the silos. So on the next slide, the best way that I can think of to characterize it is the Titanic. And we see the top of the glacier. The top of that glacier is the technology that we all focus on. But in reality, that glacier doesn't exist unless there's the people to run and manage these systems and be more connected, and the processes to enable that data flow, those policies that enable connectedness. And so what we try to focus on is really building the bottom of the glacier so that we have something at the top to exist. On the next slide, I just want to highlight one example where Kigali is an example of a city that's known to have put in place a great e-government system for certain types of business applications and processes. But in reality, they invested quite a lot of money on activities that were just taken and dropped in to the city without understanding the local context, and that were very technology driven. And most of these sensors and other types of smart equipment and ICT infrastructure is not very well utilized. Sometimes we have sensors in a water supply system where the water doesn't come out. So we should focus, on the proper and local environment. Now, on the next slide, I just want to reflect that the ecosystem of smart cities is crowded. There's the orchestrators and promoters of government. There's the financiers and enablers, whether those are international financial institutions like the World Bank, private banks, commercial enterprises, a range of sources of capital that can come in. There's a large confusion and a large number of suppliers. There's an enormous amount of innovation that we all want to harness, but ultimately we need to focus on the users and the beneficiaries, being both the city government themselves to become more connected and to be more connected to their citizens. So I think I'll go into the case study now and just talk a little bit about what this means in practice, and what this means in practice in Can Tho, which is the largest city in the Mekong Delta. Now, the government of Vietnam over the past few years has embarked on a smart city program. They put together an objective, a long-term vision of where they want to be, and they've started to work and execute a number of different activities, but these mostly stay at the higher level strategy and trying to scope what it is that they mean by smart city. And on the next slide, you'll see that this is replicated in the city of Can Tho, where some of the policy directives to implement smart city programs have come into place at the same time back in 2017. They have a vision towards 2025 with a number of different functionalities they'd like to have in place. And the World Bank has been supporting them in a number of different areas over the past couple of years, and we're currently providing that support. So on the next slide, what problem are we trying to solve is a fundamental question. And before thinking too much about data and protocols and processes, et cetera, the main thing that we're trying to solve is that the line departments in the city have historically used paper-based maps that directly contradict one another. So as an example, you see a road planned for investment that goes through at new housing development. And this contradiction on paper-based maps makes it impossible to bring city departments together to plan and invest. They can't connect when they have a different set of facts. And so that's the first fundamental challenge. How is it that each government department can see the problem and see their city with the same foundation, the same set of facts, the same set of information? And how do they work together on a single platform to be able to think through new investments? And ultimately, as a result of this lack of coordination and an inability to see the built environment, where the streets, where the road network, the power system, the housing systems, or the housing units, commercial units, without a good understanding of that is easy to digest, and overlaying the hazards that the city is facing, then it's hard for the city to plan and invest in a risk-informed way. So what we see sometimes is new development going into areas that are highly exposed to flooding. And where you build the road, you see the housing come. And so thinking about, is that road going into a hazard plane or not, is fundamental to ensure that there's physical resilience against natural hazards like flooding, which is a particular challenge in the Mekong Delta, and climate change that is exacerbating this. And so the first thing we need to do is, again, have this common set of facts across departments, and then we need to be able to layer those facts with the built environment, with the natural environment, which is the floodplain, so that we can support the city in planning and investing in a resilient fashion. On the next slide, the city themselves have put together an ambitious plan. They have 39 initiatives that are organized, as you see in these 9 different boxes, that are sectoral applications of smart city solutions. I think it's important to keep in mind that in the absence of the ICT infrastructure and the data platform that enables the interconnectedness and the data sharing to make good decisions, these 9 different areas, the types of activities and investments that would be supported, really are more adding technology to a sector. And sectors certainly can benefit from new approaches and new technologies, but unless it's connected, unless it's going through a platform that networks all the departments together, then it's really underutilized and it's sometimes difficult to make sustainable. So on the next page and on the next slide, you'll note that we, or one before that, we on the World Bank side, have been focused on developing this foundation that can unlock all of the sectoral different applications. And this is being able to share data seamlessly to make those decisions. On the next slide, you'll see the process that we've been supporting, trying to move from paper-based, or moving from paper-based maps and data to integrating through a common sharing platform. So trying to sync up these different, first digitize these analog-based data and information, then trying to link them together from a technical perspective so they can be shared. And then moving towards e-government and services that are responsive to citizens, and finally into smart city systems where we're able to layer data and information to better manage the city. So on the next slide, this is what I mean more visually. There's a number of government departments on the left, and they all manage different types of data sets, whether those are cadastre data sets like parcels and planning and zoning, whether those are topographic data sets to understand, where are the natural hazards, where are, what does the natural environment look like, and then different infrastructure layers that each of these departments is responsible for managing. If we can layer them all one on top of the other, each of these departments benefits massively from a much better set of data layers to have better information to make better decisions. And then we use the combination of these data layers to be able to support different applications in terms of traffic planning, most importantly for Kanta, developing a flood risk management information system, or other types of applications that are among the 39 applications that the city is advancing over the next few years. On the next slide, I'm talking a little bit more about this flood risk management information system. But let's go back to the fundamental challenge that the city is facing is flooding, and ensuring that they can be more resilient to that flooding is core to unlocking additional economic growth. Each of these departments, the Department of Natural Resources, Environment, the Department of Information and Technology, the Department of Construction, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, and the National Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, all of them have data layers that need to go into a single application of flood risk management. And that flood risk management information system is then used as the foundation to do better and risk-informed urban planning and development. It's to have better information to be able to respond to flood events when they occur. And importantly, these different data sets are used to inform how to operate the city's physical assets, the flood infrastructure that protects the city from flooding. In absence of a smart city platform, we can't have an effective application because these data sets are not connected. And what does that mean, practically speaking? It means that the city would need to hire a firm to go gather all these data sets to be able to build a system. They'd need to hire another firm to probably manage this system. And you have a number of different actors who will also get hired for transport planning. They'll also get hired for how do we improve or better manage or increase the efficiency of the water utility system or solid waste management. So we have firms who will put this data together, keep it on their own laptops, and engage in multiple initiatives, let's say in a single city, when all of that can be smoothed out by just ensuring that that data flows between the departments and that we're making the most use of what exists now. On the next slide, we can talk about the technology piece, and it's not much of a technology solution per se. It's simply ensuring that we have synchronization of data and information. Is the data policy and protocols of how does this data flow? What's the governance around making sure that what is collected is utilized efficiently and goes to the departments it should? Because as we all also know, data is power, or perceived as power, and being able to open your data, it comes at a perception of a loss of this type of influence. So we need the policies to be able to create not a zero-sum game, but a win-win opportunity where opening data from one department enables access of that data to another department and vice versa. And this enables the collaboration through innovation. On the next slide, going back to the way cities work today and the way in Untitled works today versus where we're trying to move. Just want to leave you all with the point that we often work like the left hand of this. We work on our own pillars and our own silos with our own computers, and we don't really talk. And smart cities is about sharing that data, but it's about the people and the processes that enable that to happen and bringing people together to be able to create better solutions, building bridges between one another, which creates the actual space for innovation and more efficient ability to plan and manage the city. So on the next slide, just a couple of examples. When we're able to put all of these things together, we can plan different scenarios for where that next road is built or where that new housing development will come, and try to understand the scenarios in terms of the cost of delivering services to that new environment, the potential of being impacted by different flooding or climate change scenarios. And that scenario planning in absence of this digital platform isn't possible. So by combining these data layers and being able to plan new scenarios or compare different scenarios, it enables us to make a better decision. Infrastructure asset management, we can do a better job in operations and maintenance and targeting where upgrades need to take place by having a better understanding of what the infrastructure assets look like. We can think about increasing the efficiency of the flow of those services through the systems. Improved disaster and risk management and climate change goes a little bit back to the first point of being able to better model out scenarios, to think through on the adaptation side where to build in areas that are less prone to adverse natural events, and how to put systems in place that can warn and respond more efficiently. And then on the mitigation side, think about how it is that efficiencies can be captured through the system of delivering services in a business as usual fashion. And then finally, increasing data sharing enables growth in within companies that can utilize that data and produce interesting applications. These open data platforms are critical to not only help government amongst itself better plan and share, but also to interact with the public and improve responsiveness to people. And so I think, with this, I just reiterate and summarize that when we think of smart cities, we don't think about technology, we think about connected. And that connected means people that are part of this process and processes that are governed by policies to enable us to share data and information to better make decisions, while at the same time putting in place the specific technical elements to build a foundation to unlock more efficient services, delivery of services through technology and innovation. And so I think this is what I wanted to discuss and to present, and I will turn it over to Jeff.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you so much. And super interesting example from Vietnam. And great to see that sort of strategic vision. I just wanted to give a couple of quick thoughts and looking at the work that we're doing around the region, working with similar initiatives with municipalities across the region. And also picking up on something that Anusha said at the very beginning, that idea of collaboration. And it's so important that this is not just an initiative of government, it's an initiative that brings in partners from the private sector, from the community, and how do we open up this space? So it's not just a one-way conversation, this is what I want, it's about sharing and going back and forth. So just three quick thoughts. One, and these are keying off on some of the things that Mark was saying, be strategic. And this is often really difficult from a municipal perspective. You are driven by often central government or the latest conference. Everybody's getting really excited about smart cities and let's all do smart cities. And that's what's driving you, right? You've got to deliver on smart cities. I've got to be smart, which is great, but that should not be the vision. The vision can't be, let's be a smart city. The vision also can't be, oh, these people came to my office in really nice suits and they've got really nice cars and they've come with this fantastic new technology and this is so exciting. Isn't this great? We're going to implement this new technology. And again, the incentives internally can often push you toward that. This is a really exciting thing. Everybody's going to be excited about it. It's going to get you a lot of face time with important people because I'm bringing in this new technology. That cannot be the vision. And those are pathways to pain and suffering and long-term, very costly undertakings that often get you nowhere. We see this time and time again across the different sectors and across different cities. It's got to be strategic. It's got to be about what the city needs. It has to be about what the people need. And I really like what you, Mark, the way you set out Vietnam's vision. None of that was about technology. None of that was about smart cities. It was all about what the city needs and how the city needs to respond. And so that was really exciting. What is the vision? What is the strategy? Second is do your homework. And this is often another difficult one. We're going to start down a path. We're going to implement some reforms. We're going to achieve our vision. Go, go, go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And you all know the pressure. I want it today. I want it tomorrow. Tomorrow at the latest. Oh no, next year, way too late. But we need to gather this data. We need to understand what we're getting into. And getting that data, and there's a certain extent to which that data can be gathered in parallel with designing and delivering the smart city initiative. But that data is extremely important, and you need to build on the back of that data. And it's not enough to ask a private company to gather the data, because that private company will gather data based on what they're trying to sell you, the service that they're trying to sell you, the technology they're trying to sell you. Government needs to be in control, needs to be driving the conversation, and needs to be driving that data management. And then the third, which I thought was really nice, was building bridges. And this is about government, private sector, and the community, the three working together. And in particular, government and private sector, public and private sector working together is really tricky. The two are very different entities. And I guess the image that I like to use to explain this is marriage. For those of you who are married, you don't realize how different you are from your spouse until you actually get married, until you have to live in the same household, follow, work out how you're going to work together, decisions, how you're going to deal with conflict, how you're going to resolve conflict, how you're going to deal with family issues and all of those kind of things. So public and private working together is a bit like marriage. It's hard work. And doing a smart city initiative in order to be smart and to do the technology and to be excited, it's a bit like getting married in order to have the wedding. Weddings are great, big party, everybody comes, it's fantastic. The day after the wedding is when the real work starts, right? That's when everything hits the wall and you've got to figure out, all right, where am I going to put my toothbrush and where are you going to put yours? How are we going to deal with, who's going to do the dishes? Who's going to do all of those really basic things? That's what the marriage is about. It's not about the wedding. And in the same way, building those bridges between public, private, and the community is absolutely essential, which requires government to take a step back and take a big picture view and be willing to look at things differently. Private sector looks at things very differently than public sector. Neither has all of the answers. Neither has all of the data. But together, and the idea of these public-private relationships, together, the sum of the parts needs to be greater. That whole needs to be much greater than the sum of its parts. So how do we drive from where we are? How do we build these bridges to someone who is looking at things in a completely different way and engaging with them? And a lot of that is about open mind, open up to conversation, to communication, looking at doing things a little bit differently while still holding on to that key vision. I just wanted to grab those three thoughts and from our experience around the region, and maybe hand off next to Maimuna for our experience from the Malaysian context. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I guess can share my slides. So, okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Maimuna Jaafar, and I'm with Iskandar Regional Development Authority, located in southern of Malaysia. And next slide, please. So today, what I will do is actually to share with all of you our experience in working with our 5 local authorities as well as other authorities. As you know, I'm also holding a smart city training, and I hope that with this sharing session, all of the PBTs will or can embark in the smart city journey. Next slide. So basically, when we talk about smart city, we know there are many challenges. And I think to name a few, what we have talked about also this morning, we talk about internet connectivity, I mean, infrastructure readiness. And infrastructure readiness is not only about the external connectivity, it's also about what you have in your offices. For example, do you have like a server for storage? Do you have a fast, reliable desktop computer, for example? So these are things that you need to look at when you want to embark on this smart city journey. Secondly, we discovered that, I think Mark also mentioned about this, there are also some disconnected or uncoordinated joint policy and collaboration, not only between agencies, but also maybe within your department itself. Because, for example, this morning when we talk about how we can actually optimize building information modeling, for example. So we talk about how the architect needs to have the system, the engineer needs to have one, the contractor needs to have one. So there are actually many disconnected things out there. Same also with your departments at the moment. And somehow we also feel that that's why the e-submission will not be able to realize because of this disconnected or infrastructure among departments within local agencies. Thirdly is the mindset change and readiness of resources. And we found out that there are many type of people in your local agencies. Capacity buildings are required, and digital and computer software actually can still be alien to some of you. And I think I have to say that COVID has actually accelerated this digital transformation and push everybody to make full use of digital, whether we are at home or either we are in the office. And lastly, these are the key items that we are going to discuss in this module, which is actually limited funding at government agencies. But again, when we talk about limited funding, I feel that it's not just about not having the money. It's also about why we are unable to get those funding, may it be from federal agency or from your state government, or or maybe you are talking about a department to mayor and so forth. So when we talk about funding, our key challenge is actually sometimes when we talk between departments, they are actually lack of understanding the full range of options available. So meaning that when you have that limitation, then it will be very difficult for your top management to actually approve your proposal for those funding. Second, I also look at we need to understand there are many solutions out there. I think tomorrow speakers from different solution providers will share with you many solutions that they have. But how can we work on and trying to understand the advantages and disadvantages of each solution? So this is something that I think making it difficult for us to get funding. And thirdly is that some areas of digital infrastructure actually remain untested or tested only to a limited capacity. I think this is also one of the items that we need to look at, and we need to explore what are the best solution that we are going to get into. And lastly, again, this is something that I also face the same thing, because there are not enough pilot projects or demonstration projects. The benefits actually is not being proven, and I find that it is very difficult to actually convince our top management to embark on some of the solutions that we know. I think Jeff also talked about the solution provider, they want to sell their products, but we as government agencies or local authorities need to think about sustainability. How do we move from not just installing a technology, how do we want to sustain the project that we have? Next slide. So when looking at this, actually, I just want to share with you a report by Deloitte that looks at what are the challenges of paying for smart city projects. So basically, their report is saying that 41% of municipalities actually looks at mixture of public and private funding, and 49% actually rely on solely public funding of some kind. And I think I also need to address that when local authority wants to venture into maybe mix of public fund and state grants, or again demonstration project, your legal department is very important to do this, because at the end of the day, there are certain legal standards that your legal department needs to understand. So meaning that just now when I talk about resources, I'm not talking only about the technical people. Your legal also needs to understand, your finance people also needs to understand how to go about. And 11% actually using regional fund, and 4% again take other grants from other people. So I think the report conclude that not many grant actually is actually purely private finance. So when I explore, when I work with my 5 local authorities and some of the local authority in Malaysia, I realized that there are also other opportunities that you can actually explore. Of course, I mentioned just now about regional fund, EU funding is actually international grants. And you can also embark on demonstration projects. There are many solution provider that want to demonstrate. So you need to look at how they can actually do a pilot project or proof of concept, and from there you decide. Because like I mentioned just now, the key challenges on funding also cover, we really don't understand what's the benefit, how it can actually help you. So demonstration project would be ideal to become the test bed, and after that, when you fully understand how it will benefit you and how much it will cost you, then you embark on the real project. Thirdly is revenue sharing between PBTs and vendors. I mean, this is looking at a win-win situation. We have juga the deferred payment from saving. This is something that we can explore, and this is actually taken from way back, I think 10 years ago when Malaysia are embarking on green technologies. These are the deferred payment that has been deployed by vendors. And lastly, I think being a local authority, I strongly feel that you all should actually work with your developer, the private sectors, but you need to provide some non-fiscal incentive, which I will elaborate in a little bit at the end of my presentation next. But before I move on to the detail of some of the projects, I bet that some of you, the 152 PBTs around Malaysia might not familiar with Iskandar Malaysia. So we are actually this year 15 years, and we cover 5 local authorities. We are an economic regional authority located in southern Malaysia, and we are about 12% of the total state of Johor. So under our area, we have Majlis Bandaraya Johor Bahru, we have Iskandar Puteri, we have the new Bandaraya Pasir Gudang, we have Kulai as well as Pontian. Next slide. So again, when we look at smart city, I always relate at, if you want to become a smart city, you have to make sure that you have taken care the sustainability of your city, meaning that smart city is actually the tools to accelerate your sustainability agenda. So for Iskandar Malaysia, for example, we look at how our circle of sustainability that look at how we can actually generate wealth, how we can actually share our wealth, and how we can actually optimize our resource to make it to become an Iskandar Malaysia holistic sustainability ecosystem. And we are actually driven, or we use or guided by our comprehensive development plan. I think this morning also Encik Sabri from Putrajaya also mentioned that whatever you do, you need a good roadmap, you need a blueprint so that it will justify why you want to do this, how you want to do that, and who actually involved or who is actually your stakeholders. Next slide. So after we look at comprehensive development plan, to make ourselves sustainable, we also embark on low carbon society in year 2010. So low carbon society provide the roadmap to make Iskandar Malaysia optimize our resources, optimize our environment, and so forth. So again, I think not only about roadmap of blueprint, you also need to stop taking your baseline. So that the importance of baseline is that when you reach your journey, maybe by 2025 or by 2030, you can actually measure your outcome. And I think measuring outcome is something that I think SDG will be able to assist you on this. So in year 2010, when we first started this, we know that by year 2025, we want to reduce about 40% of emission reduction from business as usual. So again, we have various blueprints or roadmaps, but at the same time, our local authority also develop their own roadmap. So each of them actually know what they have to do in order to together collaborate with IRDA to reduce our low carbon emission by year 2025. So the right report actually is our yearly inventory on our carbon reduction, and to date the last stock taking is 2017, and we have managed to reduce about 13% of GHG intensity reduction. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So when we look at both comprehensive development plan and also our low carbon blueprint, we realize that is there any way that we can optimize technology to actually fast track or to actually accelerate our vision to become metropolis of international standing? So that's why we have came out with the 6 dimension, look at economy, governance, environment, living, mobility, and people. Comparative to the national have another dimension which is actually infrastructure. But again, looking at our 6 dimension, we have actually put the 4 enabler and ecosystem to support our smart city dimension. So the ecosystem comprises of infrastructure, talks about connectivity, hardware, software, and data. And second one, if you want to become a smart city, you need to collect, integrate, manage, and analyze the data from your devices to one big data platform, whereby in Iskandar, Malaysia, we name it as Iskandar Malaysia Urban Observatory. And this is where all data are collected and analyzed. And thirdly, I strongly feel in the opinion that cities should actually drive smart city. So government action for public services improvement is actually important to make an easier quality of life and the community to have better life improvement. And lastly, I think related back to funding, I always feel that at PBT level, you all have to work together with the private sector. So it's also need to be private driven smart solution, and the collaboration networking need to be done in order to realize some of the smart city initiative that you want to do. Next slide. So this actually our Iskandar Malaysia Smart City journey, and I'm looking at year 2025. I will have some connected devices. I will generate the data for informed decision, and the 5 local authorities within our area will also improve in terms of smart city connectedness. And also we are looking at private driven initiative to improve quality of life. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so now the third part of my presentation, I want to talk about some of the possibilities that all PBT can do in order to realize your project. Again, remember, you need to really connect your project to sustainability first. You need to make sure that your cities are sustainable. Then you use technology to accelerate and enhance your sustainability. So I'm going to talk about 6 different types of funding possibilities. And I think just now Mark and Jeff talks about the PPP. Public-private partnership actually is a good business model to go about. But I think you need to ask yourself whether you are ready to do this, because at the same time, if they are also disconnected between department and agencies, you might have some gaps like what Mark shared just now. Next slide. So when we look at public funding, for example, I think in year 2016, we facilitate our 5 PBTs to see about how they can actually embark on this smart city journey. So at that time, we know that each of the city has actually undergoing our low carbon society roadmap. So we see how can intervention of technology and digital can actually accelerate their roadmap. But when we look at that, I think when we first embark this journey, I think Majlis Daerah Pontian, one of our local authority, is talking about how can they embark on a smart city journey, because at that time in 2016, technology is still not in the picture. So we decided that for the PBT, we have actually grouped our project into 3. Meaning that if you don't have much money, you can still do a smart city, but we call it an entry-level smart city program. So entry-level smart city program is actually talking about sustainability agenda. Never forget about your agenda 21, because those are actually projects that can be filled in as the entry level, meaning that it is out of the box. You should continue. So for example, like Pasir Gudang at that time, they are looking at how they can actually enhance their resources and how they can actually improve their internet connectivity. So the second level of smart city projects can be classified as intermediate. I know most of you have actually looked at green technology, but when a green technology is not connected to a device, data are not collected, you are still having a smart city project, but we call it an intermediate. So if you have program like energy efficiency, like energy saving, you have program, for example, like solar panel, rainwater harvesting, those are all good projects. So we call it as intermediate level. And when you are ready, when you have your big data platform, you have your centralized data center, then you started to connect all of your projects into this big data platform. And this is where we call it as advanced smart city. Remember, I mentioned just now, a smart city will not become, smart city projects will not become smart city if you don't connect your component into devices, so that you can actually collect and analyze some of your some of the programs that you have. So again, remember there are 3 levels, and don't be afraid to embark on this journey based on your capability and also your current resources. Next slide. So I'm just showing this because I know tomorrow one of the solution provider will actually share with you in detail, but this is what we call advanced level smart city. Because when we talk about smart city, it does not only try to resolve one component of your sustainability. For example, when we talk about smart traffic light, it seems like you are talking about making traffic movement better. But when we talk about smart city, they are multi program or multi-discipline that the smart city component can actually resolve. So for example, for smart traffic light, you are talking about affordability. Yeah, this is one of also of city urban challenge. Affordability, if you use your car, you can actually save fuels, for example. And at the same time, you can actually reduce your carbon emission. And again, when we talk about the main focus, is actually reduce your travel time from one destination to another destination, meaning that you can spend more time in your house. So smart city project actually should actually manage to cover many disciplines, not only one sector. Next slide. Can you just click in? Yeah. So the second project that I want to share, although I put it as public funding, this is actually an internal resources project. And again, this is, I call it internal entry level, because we actually do this manually. So this is a project that we work together with JPS and also DOE in actually identify what are the root cause of the area. And the benefit of this project, actually, although we manually put in the data, but we will be able to actually develop a heat map to show that at area A, B, and C, and identify what are actually the root cause of the pollution to this Sungai Skudai. And the benefit, we are able to actually focus on the enforcement at the area. We also put in a new policy for the hotspot area, and we also managed to working together with other agencies to improve maintenance at the focus area. Because before this, we realized that if we don't have this roadmap or heat map, then everybody will go all the way, trying to clean the river, because the river is 47 kilometers long. So now we know where we should send our people to do enforcement. Next slide. And I think when we talk about internal funding as well, I think most of you have your GIS people or department, right? So one of our city, which is Majlis Bandaraya Johor Bahru, has actually done a very good job in actually developing their own geospatial data, and this will help them to actually monitor assessment, enforcement, and so forth. So the next one is actually international grant. I think before I get into international grant, I think some people ask me how to do this. That's why I put there as key success factor. I think number one, you need to network. You need to network. And I think in order to network as well, I think we also learn that you need to know which projects to do. So if you want to really understand what project you want to do, then you actually need that roadmap. You need that blueprint, so that when you go overseas, people will approach you and always ask you, what is your priority in smart city? So you need to know at that instant what you want, so that you can actually do a 5-minute speech. And that is exactly what we did all the time. 5-minute speech telling them that what we want, why they should give us grant, and so forth. So I think the key success factor, you need to practice on this. And there are also many international grants. We have the ASEAN, we have Future City, UK government also give grant, US government give grant. But the key success factor, again, network, which projects to do, and you need to have your information at fingertips for your 5 minutes pitching when you are out there. Next slide. Next one, I think we are talking about one of the projects that we are currently managed to realize. We have started this in 2016, where we did pitching to UNDP as well as USTDA through our ASEAN Smart City Network. Next slide. So next one is actually a demonstration project. So even if you go international or you have local who wants to pitch their project, you can always talk about a demonstration project, because demonstration project actually gives an accurate information not only to you but your top management to actually put aside money for certain projects that you want to do. So demonstration project is actually a self-contained small-scale capital investment, and the purpose is actually to demonstrate at particular area so that further understanding can be derived from there, so that you can also understand the benefit of this project. So again, new technology demonstration from international product, and I know there are also many local vendor offered this demonstration project at a smaller scale, and also startup companies as well as academicians. And example is currently we are working on the project is actually a community crisis preparedness system. Why I say that this is a demonstration project? Because when we first started this, we thought that we want to do flood warning and water level monitoring. Luckily that through networking, partnership, we realized that the flood warning and water level monitoring is actually not at PBT level. It is actually done by Praban and also through the at federal level. So this is something that you can do. So currently we are doing a pilot for Iskandar Puteri area under Majlis Bandaraya Iskandar Puteri. Next slide. So the next one again, when we talk about demonstration, I always mention that actually EV cars, charging station is the easiest for any city to show or showcase the technology. But I know some of the cities, there is not much demand, but for Iskandar Malaysia and Johor especially, we are actually demand driven. But of course, during this COVID, Singaporean is actually not crossing the border, but this is something that we feel like be able to attract the Singaporean to actually come to Johor, do their shopping, do their F&B and so forth. And I think demonstration project is a good project, especially if you have working with a developer. So you can actually demonstrate in terms of your city command center, solar panel, CCTV and so forth. Next slide. Okay, I think this one, revenue sharing is something that is not being explored in many projects. But I can say that for PBT, for example, you can explore, it's a sharing operating profit among associated financial partner, and it will also profit sharing system that ensure each entity is compensated for its effort. And I think the growth of online businesses is actually a revenue sharing. For example, if you want to do e-aduan or aduan through your mobile phone, you know how you can actually self-sponsor your e-aduan, because once you hit at some followers, your advertising will come in and you will actually, it's actually a revenue sharing in these online businesses. So this is something that you want to explore. But for Iskandar Malaysia, our BRT is actually a formal performance-based revenue sharing. I mean, this is something big that we are currently doing, and we hope that we will embark or completed this project early 2023. Next slide. Okay, I think when we talk about deferred payment, this is the same mechanism that we have actually started when we started, I think like 5-6 years ago, when we want to introduce green technology. So this is a financial arrangement in which third-party developer will own, operate and maintain, and a host customer, for example, like PBT, which agree to perhaps use their buildings, use their site. So the electrical output from the solar services can actually shared through a predetermined price. So again, this is something that you can actually do, and you can test it on LED lighting, street lighting, solar panel, to name a few. Next slide. And lastly, I always say that city is actually driver to some of these new concept and agenda, because I know city, you have a say when you talk about approving development approval and so forth. So again, when we are embarking on green technology initiative, we explore that a non-fiscal incentive can be given by local authority, and they are actually simply non-monetary value but indirect gain by private sector in terms of increase of densities and plot ratios, calculation of GFA, and so forth. So I think this is something that you can actually do in your city itself and see if your developer is keen, but you give them some non-fiscal incentive. Next slide. So I guess I want to conclude by saying that local authorities need, to fully understand your needs and current capabilities, especially on cash flow and range of financing option. And I want to remind everyone that doing a smart city projects are not the same as actually constructing a bridge. This is because there are certain legal standards that you need to actually look at. There are also some IP, some licensing, maintenance that you need to budget for when you look at embarking on smart city project. But if you can do this, I think it will be good. You'll be able to do good strategic planning. You can provide further insight into the catchment area. You can actually synergize inter-agency coordination. And lastly, you can actually optimize valuable resources, especially as I mentioned just now, in enforcement and monitoring of the resources. I think with that, back to you, Anusha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pan. And thank you, Jeff and Mark, for a wonderful and insightful presentation. I have some questions from the audience that I would like to read up to you. First question is for Puan Maimuna from Atira. What are the 3 qualifying criteria would you take as a good smart city project?
Yeah. You give me 3, you asked me about 3 qualifying criteria. I always have to say this. For example, if you want to do a smart city project, you need to understand that that project first need to benefit the community. Yeah. So meaning that you cannot do a project because our city next door is doing it. So the project needs to benefit your community, or it can actually enhance productivity of government. That is actually your first criteria. And a second criteria is that whatever project that you do, it needs to be connected to another big data platform so that you can actually integrate, you can actually collect and use those data to strategize your next action. For example, when we look at energy, for example, energy efficiency in building, so you collect that data so that you can make an informed decision which level of your buildings should actually reduce maybe lighting or something like that, so that you will do it as an informed decision. And I think the third criteria for me to have a smart city project, that it should become a tool to accelerate your sustainability. I mean, if you are, I think Jeff also mentioned this, you are excited that you want to do smart city, but actually it doesn't contribute to your sustainability, then don't do it. I think that is actually my advice. I think Jeff, maybe you also want to add on to that, perhaps?
Yeah, so completely agree. And also a related point you mentioned earlier, PPP is complicated. If you're not ready to do PPP, don't do PPP. And I completely agree. Do what you're ready to do.
Yeah.
Do what you're prepared to do, and don't overstretch too much. I mean, anything smart city is always stretching. It's always pushing you. It's always challenging and trying new things, which is wonderful. But don't do PPP just because it sounds cool and everybody's talking about it. Don't do smart cities just because everybody's talking about it. Do the things that are going to take care of the government, that are going to take care of the people, but also think about your partner. And so the private sector partner that you have, whoever's going to come and invest, whoever's going to engage with you, they need to take care of you. You need to take care of them. It needs to be a relationship. And if you try to squeeze the private sector and get everything out of them without paying anything, you'll lose in the end because the whole thing will fall apart. And in the same way, if the private sector comes in and tries to grab lots of profit and doesn't care about the city, then those are not the people you want to do business with, because that will fail as well. So as always, completely agree with you, Maimuna.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question. What are the key resources that cities should mobilize to deliver sustainable smart city initiative? Maybe Mark, you can take this question.
Sure. If the fundamental resource that cities should be focused on securing is the international expertise of consultants, let's say, who have experience in the underlying policies that enable the data sharing. So each city has limited time and resources, each administration does. And I think the biggest benefit of thinking through how to design and implement smart city activities is the policies and processes that are going to enable the connectedness. And and I'd say that would be more important than the most sophisticated experts about all the types of technology, because if the foundation isn't solid, then it is difficult to build something strong. So that's the first place where I would focus.
True enough. Puan Maimuna, do you have anything to add on that?
What's the question again just now?
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. What are the key resources that the city should mobilize to deliver sustainable smart city initiatives?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we didn't realize that doing smart city requires teamwork, because especially when we look at smart city projects, you will require, of course, your background as ICT or technology-driven person. But again, you also need to relate back to the end user, which it can be your planning department. You can also become your engineering department or your architect department. So the resources, like, you need to combine your brain, meaning that you need to work together. And I think if you are able to do that, then you can actually come up with a good idea and a good solution of what your cities actually need. So I think the first thing that you need to do is form that team, form the unit, so that everybody is in the same page.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next question from Zulkifli. How do you monitor the smart city planning being implemented? Any of you can take up the question?
Yeah, actually, we don't actually monitor the smart city planning, but we monitor the outcome.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, I mentioned just now that, I mean, for our region, for example, at the end of the day, we are actually measuring our outcome. We are looking at, we have like about 9 targets that we want to achieve. So meaning that perhaps some of the project that they are doing only give an output base. So meaning that maybe in the next 2 years, there will be an outcome. So we actually monitor the outcome, not the output base of the project that they are doing. But at the same time, through our urban observatory, we have started to actually collect all of those projects, inventory, I say inventory, so that we can also look at where are this project and what are the outcome will be from that project.
That will touch basically on the data, basically, right? So is it important to access to the data, and should be the data be gathered in advance, or can it be gathered as the smart city initiative is implemented?
That's why just now I give an example that doing this smart city, there is actually 3 levels. So one is the entry level. So maybe at entry level, you don't actually collect the data. It's just like an out of the box activities that you're doing. But at the intermediate level, you start to use technology, to enhance, to accelerate some of your sustainability agenda. But the real smart city is when you start to collect those data. So meaning that if you have a solar panel, so when you first started, you might not connect the device into your big platform. So perhaps when you start to move, then you need to connect them so that you can have, you can start to collect the data, use the data, and then make some analysis and scenario planning to it. So that is actually a phasing to it, I should say, because you cannot just grab anything that you want to do without fully understanding what are the benefit and the outcome of your project.
Jeff, do you want to add anything on this? You're on mute, Jeff. Okay.
Yeah, I think the data thing is difficult, right? I mean, you get the two ends of the extreme there. It's often tempting to just charge in and start doing things without gathering any data first, and because it sounds like the right thing to do. But it's always really interesting. One of the other questions was about rural areas and how we engage with rural areas. If you don't have the data around the access to technology, the connectivity of rural areas, the access to capacity builds, so when people in rural areas want to use these new services, are they really going to be able to understand the interfaces and how is that going to work? That initial data is essential to gather in order to design something that fits with the needs of the people. At the same time, it's also tempting to hide behind the data and to say, until I have all the data, until I know everything, I can't move. And that's not true either. And it's finding that balance between the two of getting just that initial bit of data so that you understand enough. And then as you're moving forward, making sure that that data gathering and really understanding that is really interesting. Can I throw back a counter question?
Okay.
To what extent should the data be transparent? So for instance, especially with smart city applications, you want to encourage enthusiasm, not just amongst government staff who come up with great new ideas and want to run forward with all these new crazy things, which is great, but you also want to encourage private companies and private individuals to come up with new ideas. And the more they have access to data, the more they're able to come up with these new ideas and deliver something that's really useful. But government is often very cautious about sharing data. And there's certain data that can be shared and certain data that can't. Does Maimuna, what's been your experience on sharing of data? To what extent do you share, and to what extent does government hold on?
Yeah, I guess the matters related to sharing data is very sensitive. Even I have to say that within government agency also we don't share data. But I think we have started to look at the open data policy. But again, when we talk about data, there are also raw data and aggregated data. So I think at our side, we will surely want to become to make data available, because this is where our potential investor will actually do their market research, probability and so forth. But sometimes we don't have to share raw data, because raw data is very, it can be confidential and personal. But aggregated data is something that we should be able to share so that people can make some insights of that aggregated data that we put on board. So to us, we are working on that, but not raw data. Raw data is still a personal data. Yeah.
But how there's a question from Shasha. How to measure readiness of the citizen accepting smart city, especially in rural area?
Yeah, rural. I think for rural area, of course, when we talk about digital transformation, if you see that Grab, Foodpanda, Lazada, Shopee started to send out goods to the rural area, then you know that they are part of that digital transformation. They are ready because they know how to shop online, at least. And if they don't have internet connectivity, they're not able to shop online. So to me, those are what I call a visual measurement. You know, it's the same like when people say that if there is McDonald's in your neighborhood, you know that your neighborhood is good. So same, I think my answer to the question is that if you see a food panda Grab coming into the rural area, they are already accepting the smart city without they realizing it actually.
All right. Mark, would you want to, do you have any other things to add on this? How do you measure readiness of citizen accepting smart city in rural area?
Tricky question, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm asking Mark the similar question because Vietnam is not as
Yeah,
developed as
Vietnam.
Malaysia, so maybe he have another, another way of to measure it. Mark, are you there? You're on mute, Mark.
While Mark is getting ready, I just want to add that
Yes,
as an American, I find it very scary that the reference to the McDonald's as showing whether your neighborhood is good.
It does.
And I want to apologize that we have.
And that's how when you compare Big Mac price, you know, from one country to another, people make that comparison. Yeah.
Okay. I just apologize behalf of Mark. He has to leave because his wife is going on labor. So congratulations,
Wow,
Mark.
congratulations, Mark.
Yeah, all right.
But Anusha, I just want to highlight,
Yes.
Vietnam actually has improved its internet connectivity since the last 4 years.
Yes.
They used to be number 5 or 6 in ASEAN. Now I think they are number 2nd or 3rd. So Malaysia has to actually catch up on that internet connectivity if we don't want to lose some of our investor to Vietnam.
True enough. All right. Maybe I'll go for another question. All right. If funding is not an issue, how can PBT or local authority choose the right smart city project to implement? Any take?
Okay. So I think I know that most PBTs has a lot of ideas through knowledge sharing like this, webinar and so forth. But I always want to warn that if you want to embark on a smart city project, you need to really understand your urban challenge. Yeah, you need to identify your the urban challenges that your city is facing. So for example, if you have a quiet town, for example, anywhere, you don't have traffic jams, don't embark on smart traffic light. It happened, you know. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to understand what is your urban challenges, because your project is supposedly to improve the quality of life of your people. And I think there is actually some tools that you can use to prioritize your project and to really understand what does your city needs. So maybe after this you can Google, which I'm using these tools in my class. So it's actually a design thinking process as well as the priority metrics. So if you go through that process and really understand what is your challenges, then I'm sure you will not go wrong in selecting your project. Yeah.
True enough. Okay, one last question. All right, maybe
Wait,
Jeff.
Anusha,
Yeah,
I wanted to ask about that. I want to know where there's this PBT that has no funding problems. That sounds like a great place to live. I've never seen one of those before.
Yeah, true enough. I believe the small PBTs, they would have the problem. They may have so many ideas how to achieve a smart city, but funding is a barrier, one of it.
I think even in Singapore we have funding challenges. So no matter where you are, everybody. But I think going back to something Maimuna said in her presentation, the 5-minute elevator pitch.
Yeah,
and this is so important, and it's a really good practice when you're thinking, even if you're not thinking about money issues, if you break down the the core issues. Is the public sector, what does the public sector need? What does government need? What are the priorities? What does the community need? What are the priorities? What needs to happen? And then which of these are the best to sell to the private investor? How are you going to get the capital for this? How does the money come in? But now boil it all down to a nice, simple elevator pitch.
Yeah.
That really helps you think through things. It really clarifies issues. Sometimes we can get lost in all the details and all the detailed reports. All of that's really important. But if you can't boil it down to the quick pitch, you're probably missing some of these core elements. So I think she's absolutely right. It's really
and
important.
I think you can do that through practicing. You need to practice, practice, and practice. Yeah.
I think most of things you need to practice. Nothing comes easy, right? Okay, one last question from Atira. Can you share how do you measure benefits received by benefactor? Jeff or Maimuna?
So obviously at the World Bank, we are great. We love measuring things. So we do all kinds of different measurings, and the challenges are, who are the beneficiaries, and making sure you've defined the beneficiaries well and understanding where those benefits go. And often the beneficiaries are different groups with very different ways of measuring impact, the type of impact that you want, and so pulling those pieces of information out. And we come back to that question of data. And data is so important, and making sure you keep track of how these things work. And sometimes it's tempting to launch a smart city initiative. It's all really exciting. We're going to get the investment in. We're going to get the technology in. Isn't this great? And if you don't keep track of it, smart city initiatives are not monolithic. They're not one way, and this is where we're always going to go this way. You need to adjust to fit with the beneficiaries, and those beneficiaries change. Their needs change. Is one McDonald's enough? Should we have 2 McDonald's or 3 McDonald's? What is it that we want to get out of this initiative? And that will change dramatically over time. And we just need to be sensitive to that and be flexible and be able to move. But if you don't have the data, you won't know.
Yeah. Agree, Jeff.
It's true.
I don't have to say more. I agree.
All right. And that concludes our session today. That collaboration and prioritizing is very important in order to create a clear vision in order achieving a smart city development. And thank you, Jeff and Puan Maimuna and Mark for this session. And I hand over back to Mr. Nomazlan for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Hello. Thank you so much, Ms. Anusha. Okay, my name is Nomazlan from I-KPKT. I will in charge for this last module for today, which is module 4. This module will focus on contribution of smart cities to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. Well, Lisa, are you there?
Yes, Assalamualaikum. Yes, I'm here, Cik Mazlan.
Thank you, Madam. So, without further ado, I would like to call upon Madam Town Planner Technologies, Nurliza Hashim, CEO of URBANICE Malaysia, to deliver, to share, and to say something on contribution of smart cities to the achievement of SDGs. Please, Madam.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Cik Mazlan. Assalamualaikum pada semua. I hope being the last presenter, there are still participants in the room. So it's been a long day for everyone. Okay, today my sharing is actually talking about smart cities and the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah, and I think from morning I've been listening in and on and off, and the last group session was very interesting. And I think it actually falls quite nicely into the topic that I'm speaking on, especially when some of the speakers were trying to allude and conclude to say that, how important is it when we talk about smart cities. We understand that smart cities is should be providing solutions for the local. And this is where I think the context is actually very important, because when we talk about cities, we talk about this huge population that's living in urban areas, and that's getting more and more over time. And I guess because of that, all kinds of solutions as planners, technologies are coming up with all kinds of solutions to address this huge urban population that's living in urban areas, and similarly for Malaysia as well. So in the morning we hear also, you know, the discussion about urbanization, and how urbanization is definitely one of the key issues. That's the reason on why our cities are very challenged to manage the many issues that we are facing. So even for Malaysia, especially with urbanization rate being at 78%, and that's not going to stop, it's going to continue to about 85%. And I guess in that situation, what it means is that all this kind of growth, it just will put a lot of pressure on our natural resources, a lot of pressure on how we manage cities more efficiently and effectively. And I guess that's where the agenda of smart city becomes important, because it could provide you with a better way to overcome some of these issues. So and I think you know, smart city is whether or not it's a real solution, it's something that needs to fit into your needs. And but it's definitely something that's becoming a big reality today because of how fast technology itself have actually gained momentum. It's becoming more accessible, and it's becoming also more affordable. And I guess when that two combination happens, you know, for us to actually use technologies to solve some of the problems that we have becomes very, very relevant and important. So in context of what I'll be talking about, which is more in terms of sustainability, I'm going to draw you to the 17 SDG goals, in which in the 17 SDG goals was formulated and adopted by member states of United Nations, which include Malaysia, as 17 goals altogether. And if we look at the dimensions of all these 17 goals, it covers the aspects of social, environment, and economics, which is generally one of the, I mean, is the key fundamental towards growth, development that we are all facing. So these 17 goals actually have supported targets, and there's 169 targets altogether that supports the achievement of the 17 goal, which was formulated because globally it is found that there's still so much issue with regards to being faced by nations, cities all over the world. And we need to continuously and collectively aim towards the same goal, so that we can overcome some of the issues in terms of inequality, climate change, you know, and improving the well-being of people that's living, especially living in urban areas. And I think this morning also it was reflected by some of the speakers on how this came about, and you know, how Malaysia embraced this. So it's not really a new agenda. Sustainability actually has been in the forefront of a lot of our planning, a lot of our blueprints, a lot of our economic plans as well. In fact, it has also helped to formulate some of our national policies, the setting up of several agencies, all because we realize the importance of the sustainability agenda. So if we talk in context of smart and also in terms of sustainability, definitely the sustainability is the long-term goal in whatever solutions that we are trying to adopt to overcome the issues we are facing. So in Malaysia, we are actually very serious about our commitment to the SDGs, since we also ratified it in 2015, and we have already formulated a National SDG Council, and we have a steering committee to support it and working committees. So these working committees was framed following the 11 Malaysia Plan. And I believe once the 12 Malaysia Plan is formalized, probably the working committees will also be aligned to that formulation. And because today we are looking in the context of local government, we are looking in terms of cities, and when we talk about the 17 SDGs, probably the big question is how relevant it is into cities or to local governments. So based on the ministry itself, Ministry of Housing and Local Government, we look at how SDG 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 12, which is Responsible Consumption and Production, as well as SDG 1, which is No Poverty, is actually directly related to the core work that is being done by the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. And of course, in terms of contributing to national achievement of the SDGs, the ministry also contributes towards SDG 2, SDG 3, 13, as well as 17. And of course, through the and various other agencies that we have under the ministry, we definitely contribute towards the strategic planning that's involved, whether for the entire country or also for the cities where the 154 local governments are looking after in Malaysia. And when we look at the Local Government Act, which is the Act 171, definitely it covers 6 main areas: governance, health and public safety, planning and communal, business, individual service, roads and drains infrastructure. You find that some of the SDGs are very related to the current functions that local governments are already undertaking. And but most importantly, because local government has a jurisdiction over an area wide, so you also have stakeholders, which are communities, your industries, your resource providers, and of course the people in the local authorities itself. So this is very important, I think, as we try to understand or whether or not all these are different things, but all I can say is that actually it's all encompassing, and that's where local government role and function, and it's actually very related to the 169 targets. We find that 70% of the SDGs actually can be implemented at the local level, and this is something that local government should be aware of, because as we hear quite correctly since morning itself, the whole concept of being smart is actually to overcome some of these issues we have at the city level. And this is actually carried through in the discussion even at the global level, where in 2016 member states once again came together to adopt the new urban agenda. This time around, the new urban agenda focused specifically to cities and urban areas, and of course it incorporates already all the key agendas at the global level, which is the SDGs, the Paris Commitment, the Sendai Framework, which talks about risk reduction, and even the Addis Ababa, which talks about sustainable municipal finance. So this document is actually quite an important document because it integrates the framework, and it champions the fact that cities are for all and no one should be left behind. And this is where we at in KPKT as well as URBANISE, we've actually developed our own Malaysia SDG cities. So as Puan Maimuna was promoting the idea of having a tool so that you could actually develop your priorities. So if you align your smart cities to actually the agenda on sustainability, you can also use the tool that we provide in for the Malaysia SDG cities, because what we are looking at here in context of smart city is how will smart city help us to meet the global goals, And I think this was the question that Cik Mazlan popped up when he introduced me in the beginning. Definitely, we see, that smart cities can actually definitely contribute towards sustainability because a city that makes better use of its resources is a smart city, because it makes its choice better. City that enhances its process for a better living environment, whether it's through data, through analytics, or through just good management. And of course, city that's livable and city that is resilient and is better able to overcome its challenges. So these are core when we are talking about just simple aspects of sustainability and how smart cities actually come into frame. And when this morning our TKSU, Dr. Mary, defined smart city, she said that there's no real definition because of the multi-focus elements that we need to focus in when we talk about smart city. And I think that's exactly what I'm also trying to link, because even for Malaysia, when we define smart city, we look at it in terms of the context of a very multi-focus element, which is talking about the smart economy, smart living, smart people, smart mobility, environment, governance, as well as smart digital infrastructure. So these multi-focus elements are important because cities are complex and they represent quite many dimensions. And it is very clearly stated in the smart city framework that one of the key outcomes is to improve the well-being and quality of life. So I think this is a main essence on anyone who's deciding to adopt any kind of solution using technology should actually consider whether or not such outcomes are achievable or not. And during the Quito meeting as well in 2016, when they adopted the new urban agenda under declaration number 66, it was clearly stated that we need to commit to adopt a smart city approach, which makes use of the opportunities from either digitalization, cleaner technologies, innovative solutions, in order to provide for more environmentally friendly choices so that we can boost our economic growth sustainably and also to improve the city's service delivery. So this is where I think when we talk in context of smart city and linking it to the sustainability agenda, we look at how smart city can actually provide for the urban well-being goals, looking at city management and urban services, and of course technology as a main enabler to improve what this declaration have actually promoted and suggested. So even us in URBANISE, we are actually a center of excellence under the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. We are also looking into the agenda of smart city, and we focus in terms of housing and communities, low carbon urban mobility, as well as the urban system and services. And we are doing that through our Malaysia Urban Innovation Hub. So what I would like to also emphasize is that there was a lot of discussion just now about how do we choose, the solution, what will be our priority. I think our priority will very much depend on what this kind of figures shows to you. So Malaysia as a whole, we are already seeing some change in demographic structure. We know we are going into an aging society. We know our household size is getting smaller. Even for Kuala Lumpur, it's already at 3. And for some other major cities, it's dropping, also smaller than the national average. So, and not only we know all this demographic profile, we know the challenges that our cities are facing. So I think if any decision to choose that should actually be very dependent on that situation on the ground. And this is where listening to the needs of the local become very important. And this could easily be done using technology, through a very open system where you can look at how to improve communication, also to improve a two-way process in getting information, as well as updating citizens into as to what you're doing. Because I think I find that a lot of time we are always in the habit of asking for data, but we are not really in the habit of actually sharing the outcome of whatever data that we have requested. So this is where I think it becomes a two-way process, and it's very important that we understand this. So back 2 years ago, we did a very simple survey trying to understand and map out some of the issues that our Malaysian local governments are facing, especially in context of the 7 focus areas of our smart city components. So I'm not going to go into very detail, but I just wanted to share because some of the PBTs participated. So there were a lot of issues that were raised, and we can see here on some of the issues that were highlighted in terms of priority. So a lot of it is in terms of economy. And I remembered, I think this morning, one of the speakers says that to him, the most important thing is finance. If you don't have funding, it cannot happen. So probably that's why this one also came up quite strongly. And in terms of mapping out the feedback in terms of how they expect what aspects will transform their city and what kind of actions do they anticipate are most important to be taken in the next 5 years. Smart environment came up first, so just now issue will be economy. Smart environment is something that they look at as a key priority and easy to do over the next 5 years. And also looking at some of the challenges, governance become a key challenge. So that's actually quite interesting to just look at that 3 elements, because they already show you a pattern that for the local government, these are things that what even if they were to go forward in terms of smart city, they still are challenged by some of these issues on the ground. So we also started something on our own in URBANICE. We call it the Collaborative Community Resilience Program. It's something that we did totally during the lockdown because we realized that there were so much of as people were locked down in their houses. People were actually not locked down in terms of creativity and communicating in the web and in the social media. And so we wanted to have a sharing platform where people could actually share what are their work that they are doing with in helping community during the pandemic. So it is actually quite interesting, and And actually, it's quite amazing to see how Malaysians are really doing a lot in terms of overcoming some of the issues on the ground, you know. And this kind of sharing platform helps you to not replicate some of the program, you know. It makes you understand how strong your community are and whether there's opportunity to actually just work with them, and so that government doesn't have to really repeat some of this program on your own, you know. So you know, I do encourage people to actually look into this platform that we have developed, because it's got some really marvelous work done by really, you know, names that you've never heard of, organizations that are very grassroots and, you know, championing causes which are very local. And I think if you want to be smart, I think I think we should also listen to the people, you know? And this is one way of sharing and listening. So when we talk about the SDGs, how we always look at the SDGs is that it's not one solution for one SDGs, you know. It's trying to link one program, one solution to many dimensions. So if you have a smart solution, and solutions can be expensive, some of it, and you know, of course, some could be very simple, low tech, but still, you know, it shouldn't just be for one outcome. So in the case of looking at it from the angle of sustainability, we always try to encourage, even in our Malaysia SDG Cities program, we always try to encourage people to have that multi-dimensional approach. So in terms of SDG, in for example, one of the things that's being done very aggressively in cities today is actually doing urban farming. You know, it's probably everywhere, you know. And I was actually quite intrigued as to how much urban farm has actually improved over a very short period, you know. And now there are so many startups that's actually developing all kinds of tools to help to make urban farm, you know, possible anywhere, you know, on the roofs, vertical, on the walls, in a cabin, you know, and using all kinds of technology application to even tell you when to do picking of fruits and harvest your produce, you know. So it's actually some of it are really low tech and developed by real small startup companies, and I think this is important because not only it's done by local talent, so again it gives jobs, and then you're producing food locally, so you overcome the hunger issue, which is our SDG 2. And once you've got food and also such kind of urban farm could probably give some local jobs, so you overcome poverty issue. And then when you have food, you are also healthy, you overcome the health and well-being issue, and that's where you actually create a sustainable community, you know. So these are things that we are looking at in terms of how a simple program like urban farm should try to understand on how it could build on the program, and not just about a social program, not just about a community coming together and doing it, you know. So if we could solve the problem of food hunger, you know, that's even much better. And one of the other project which not many I think have done is trying to map out the urban poor, because when we are doing our SDG reporting, especially SDG 1 and SDG 2, we know as a statistics how many % of our people are poor, under a certain level of poverty line, you know, but we don't know where they are. And because all our data are actually either at the national level, state level, or the most up to the district level, you know, but you cannot know exactly which community are poor. So this is where such kind of smart or technologies could actually help This is a project done in Liberia, and Liberia is actually one of the biggest slum settlement in Kenya. You know? And you know how slums are, where it's definitely it's all tight, and you can't even understand where you are sometimes. So a young group of young people who are living in the slums, they actually uses all kinds of open platforms, and started to do this project which they call the Map of Liberia. And not only that, they also involve the community through a web mapping process, and it's actually very interesting. When they first started and till today, they now could really know what's happening inside. They could actually target to improve some of the really poor living conditions that are inside the slums itself. So even within the slums, there are better areas and worse areas, and so this mapping actually allows them to actually improve the area, and making basic services accessible to them. So I think that this is a really interesting program. Of course, for us is we had a zero slum policy, but still we don't really map out where our urban poor community is. So so that's why sometimes or not, I also personally wonder whether how much of our program have a good outreach to the people who really need it on the ground. So there are many ways to do that, and of course, digital literacy program is something that I think should happen. I think with the pandemic, we learn a lot about digital literacy, or not only digital literacy, we also know about gaps, how accessible digital infrastructure is to people. So this is things that I think in some cities they are trying very hard to target groups of people which are really vulnerable, and see whether or not they can help this kind of communities, so that they are able to use, understand, and also find information, and hopefully through enabling some form of digital literacy, they're able to find jobs and have change their life. And so I think one of the things that I also realized, that when we talk about smart, if we could social engineer smart city, if we could have a social design to smart city as one of the agenda, then whatever smart solutions that we actually choose, it can actually solve some of the problems that cities are facing, and this includes even taking care of the homeless. I mean, take a person who have no access to media, and now all jobs are on the web. So how do a person look for a job? Because nobody advertise anymore on newspaper, or put it at the 7-Eleven like they used to. In the old days, they can put it at a kedai runcit or somewhere, but those are all gone. So how do people know? How do they access information? And especially when they are illiterate, So I think these are real issues on the ground. And mind you, a city as big as San Francisco also have this kind of issue, because they are the Silicon Valley, of tech, and yet they are also one of the biggest city with homelessness issue. And they've actually started digital literacy program by the tech companies. So I think that's something which I find that's how do you give back at the end of the day? And even a simple program like what we did in terms of the community hub, we just recycle a cabin, but it's not so much of the physical structure. It's the fact that we reinvented what social space is all about. and with no questions as to how it's being used, how it's being managed, and I think trying to understand what community empowerment is really all about. It's something that how do you build smart community, for example? And we always say that smart community is, it's about literacy, digital literacy, or having some form of accessibility to tech. But what about as simple as community being able to make decisions on their own? What about that? That very how when if we can define smart community as just people who are able to care for themselves, So these are things that which I think are quite important. Is a soft part of understanding what a smart city is all about, and it's just as important. So it's not sometimes it's not just about tech. For me, it's also could be a smart solution in terms of space design that needs to be put in place in order to overcome some of the issues that we have. And this includes even making our city, accessible and giving equal opportunities for all kinds of people, children, age, the disabled. I think these are very important because that will really contribute to SDG 3, which is the well-being, the how to create equality, and also creating more sustainable cities. Because at the end of the day, cities, Malaysia is going into age society now. We'll be an aging country by the time of 2050, and so we don't have much time, we don't even have the infrastructure to support it. Singapore have started to build in Sembawang, I was told, their first neighborhood dementia-friendly neighborhood, not even house, home, or buildings, but communities or neighborhoods. I think because they realize that 1 in 10 people aged above 70 in Singapore has dementia. I'm not sure whether we have that data, because we don't really register. So I think this is something that of a growing concern, and we are already seeing care programs in Malaysia, and that's a signal that maybe the numbers of dementia in our country is also increasing. But how do we prepare ourselves for this kind of issues to come into it? So and when we talk about energy, for example, actually I've sort of arranged it in a manner that it falls into the SDGs, which you can see on top here. So you can see that simple initiatives could actually cover more than one SDGs. In fact, most of the time we try to ensure that it shouldn't just be one-to-one. So even when we talk about clean, renewable energy, we've always been talking about the big power plants, providing for, but I think what if we make energy efficient or renewable energy also accessible to the lower income groups, So this is a research program that we ourselves are doing with some of the PPR, which we are testing on how to actually provide clean energy to PPR homes. So we've got 3 case studies, one in Setapak, one in Putrajaya, and another one in Shah Alam, as to how to find a good solution towards producing clean energy. But we didn't just stop there, it's just not about the clean energy, because but it's also how do they earn, how could they cover the cost of common area maintenance, and how could they generate energy for the common area so that they can reduce their monthly commitment. So it's got a few agendas that we've linked here, and I think this is where we can look at some kind of solutions that can fit into some of the issues that some of these areas are having. And I also decided to put this slide up because I find that you know, there are also technologies and tools that are in terms of the analytics. So it's just not about just solutions, you know, but it's also about design, preemptive kind of tools and analytics, especially in terms of planning, because in Malaysia we open up townships, we built cities, you know, and but how many of our new towns are very responsive to climatic situation? That means to say, do we study where the wind direction is? Do we study how hot the area is, you know? So this can actually, if we are very, if we use this kind of tools, we generally can actually reduce the amount of energy that we're going to consume. And I think that's even a smarter solution, rather than having a technology to produce energy to meet the consumption demand. But what if we actually reduce the energy consumption through preventive measure by making sure that our design solutions are smart enough to actually overcome that high consumption rate, you know. So that's a lot of tools that's available in the market, and I think this is where professionals also need to start to look into this. So it's just not city managers, but it's also how professionals are also looking at all this. And it's the same for water, you know. We take water quite lightly, but you know, every time we have a disruption of water, that's the only time I think we are concerned about water. But you know, when we take care of water, actually we are overcoming a lot of the SDGs, you know. So it's just not about making sure that we have enough water, which is SDG 6, but it's also to make sure we protect the ecosystem that gives us water, which is both SDG 14 and 15. I didn't put 15 there, but actually 15 is also important because you protect the areas that wants to produce water for you. And of course, you also help in terms of climate action. And of course, if you have clean water, it generates in terms of how the health of the people that's living in your city. So water is a very important area that we should all be concerned about. Of course, it covers so many agencies that's involved with it, you know, people who regulate water, people who are taking care of wastewater. And I think this is something that, you know, smart governance become important here. You know, how do we bring in all these agencies together to actually overcome these very territorial issues that we have, in order for us to have a more integrated water management system that not only fulfill the demand side, but also the protection of natural areas that's important to sustain the provision of water over the period of time. Sorry. And, sorry about that. Yeah. Also, in terms of design, you know, we should also be looking into urban design. Yeah. Sorry. And this is where smart drains, sustainable drains. I think my friends in University Science Malaysia have been trying to do this for quite a while, you know, trying to make sure that we can roll out sustainable urban drains in all the cities. But I don't think we, till today, even though we have MASMA actually is already a second version of our MASMA. However, till today, we are still not able to get our sustainable urban drainage in place. So we talk about so much about smart city, but some of these low-hanging solutions are right in front of us, and they are actually important solutions, especially in the city's context, and especially because if we don't design it properly, we only will have a maintenance issue. We have a water quality issue, and that leads to more treatment issue. So in context of looking at it from the sustainability angle, you need to look at it in the entire ecosystem, from the beginning right until the end, and of course, if possible, the whole continuous cycle altogether. So this is where I find that on one hand, we are talking so much about smart city, but there are some of the very simple solutions that we are not really able to actually address because of maybe some of the regulations that we have, some of the standards that we are so used to over 20 to 30 years, that we are not able to change some of our regulatory framework. So I think the third issue, just the challenge raised by the PPT that we did the survey just now, where I show you, is actually quite true. Regulatory is one of the challenge that they actually face in terms of delivering smart solutions. So and of course, some countries have even gone much further. I mean, the fact that people are using wastewater to produce hydrogen fuel cells, which is what Japan have been doing, Germany has been doing, and now you have Saudi Arabia doing a whole entire city, NEOM city, based on to produce hydrogen fuel cells. It's like quite an amazing journey from wastewater into hydrogen. But I mean, this is very high tech. But what I was just trying to relate as to, if we are really smart, then everything becomes a resource. Waste can be a resource. And I think this is where understanding not only smart, but also sustainability becomes very crucial, because then you'll be looking at a cycle, how to close that loop all the time, if it's a wastewater, how to close that loop so that there is definitely not wastewater. So even Putrajaya, when we designed all that water body in Putrajaya, and I think they had issues managing the water, the quality of the water, and they are also using some real-time monitoring system to manage that. So I mean, this could be a good starter because they are now having a lot of sensors fixed, even in their waterways. So it could lead to all kinds of other solutions even in the future. And of course, housing, housing is very, very crucial when we talk about housing. And this is where, for me, it's not just about having a Wi-Fi putting into your homes, but even the living condition itself. How do you put everything together, as one lifestyle, whether it's mobility together with connectivity, affordability, accessibility, how can that smart built environment be designed in one area, so that smart shouldn't be looked at as just one off, so you just have one smart economy project, one smart environment project, but what if we have all that 7 dimensions together in a neighborhood, so that we could actually create that living environment. And of course, low carbon mobility is definitely something that have to happen, because a lot of times when we talk about this, we look at a high tech solution, but there are the most low tech solution, which is walking, cycling, and of course even a bus. It's not as sexy as a tram or a people mover system like some countries have, but there are transit systems that can actually be used. And I've seen this in some cities which, uses the most traditional mode, but in a more organized manner. And once they are doing that, for me, that's a low-tech, smart solution. I think that's even better than trying to do a high-tech smart solution or expensive solution, because funding has been raised from morning till afternoon, and there are cities without much funds, but they're still trying to overcome some of their issues. Data is something definitely very, very important, and a lot of times data is being used to not only make I think it's most now big data is being used a lot by retailers and for businesses. But I think big data can really assist us to actually understand about people behavior, so that we can overcome some of the issues that we have in our city. For example, in Seoul, they have this owl bus in Seoul, which actually runs from very late night till 5 a.m. But how did this owl bus come about? So it was through a realization, through big data, that they saw a lot of active social media or WhatsApp that was happening between and they realized that actually people are actually, especially some of the organizations or international offices that actually close very late at night. They have 2 different operating hours, and there's practically no public transit during those time. So when they realized that, that's when they actually provided these solutions at this time of the day. So these are things which actually you see, how understanding people behavior, which could lead to a better solution, becomes very important. Even understanding how to improve their lifestyle, for example, you're already cycling to work or walking to work. So you now try to inculcate the fact that you're also educating them to the next level of giving them more inputs in terms of how much carbon that they are saving, so how much calories they are burned. I think that one in everyone's smart watch is already doing that. But I think if you make them understand what they're also contributing towards the environment, and also in terms of lifestyle change, that will also be something very beneficial. This is a city in Denmark, which is called Kalundborg, and I always like to flash this slide because I find that not many cities does this, where they close the loop every time. There's a very strong collaboration between the public and the private enterprises that sort of buy or start a business based on residual products of another enterprise. So a waste from one industry becomes a resource for another industry. So the loop just keeps on going and keeps on closing, and the city councils just facilitate this process, and the symbiosis created, an industrial ecosystem, which is actually quite incredible in this town. So I think this becomes a very conscious effort, not only to have an industrial activity, but also to be very conscious about environment, and of course there's a lot of innovation here, and it's quite amazing some of the processes that I saw involving some of the waste in order for them to reuse the waste as a resource. So yeah, it's things like this is happening, and now buildings, of course, are becoming smarter, but buildings getting smart has been there for some time, but I think what we are realizing, especially like at some cities where they are going extra mile now, they are not just talking about the smart building, but they are also talking about the people living in it, like in Singapore, they are realizing that household size are getting smaller, people are getting elderly, some of them are living alone, and they're starting to put sensors in the house that will enable these homes to actually send a signal if people fall in the toilet, or if some accidents happen in the house. So these are things which building itself actually will go through a process. So if we don't start at all, I think it will coming to this point will even take longer. So I realized that cities who started much earlier, they're closing the gap, they're closing the loop better and better over time. And I think this is something that has to be done. And even in terms of green biodiversity, it's just amazing. Cities which used to be very industrial, becoming more and green. I mean, let's take Beijing, one of the most polluted city at one time, but now they have 40 meters square of green space per person. We don't have that kind of space even in Kuala Lumpur. In Kuala Lumpur, it's minimizing now to about 11 meters square per person. So these are things which we talk about smart, but how do we really be smart about some of our decision, our planning, so that the quality of life is not being compromised. Waste, of course, is a very crucial, and waste has a very big ecosystem. If you manage waste properly, and it's just not recycling, it's also waste diversion to landfill. It's also reducing our own consumption, and also being smart about production. So actually waste is like end to end, it's got a big ecosystem in it. And if you can bring technology right to homes, like a lot of projects that I've visited that's trying to do it on a smaller scale, where they're involving community, like this is a zero energy eco community in South London. It's got all the attributes of a smart homes and smart lifestyle. Nobody owns a car there, everything's EV. This started as a trial project, but trial projects are actually was meant to be a research, so that we can see how people are adapting, and we don't see people actually moving backwards, but people actually for it and moving forward. That means to say they are embracing it. So it might not be a big community, but it's already telling you on what preference people do have. I mean, after all, there are some cities which are really going all the way out, like Barcelona, and they apply innovative solution to manage its services and resources to improve their citizens' quality of life. Because if you go to Barcelona, I mean, I'm sure some of you, even if you see pictures or whatever, it's not really a modern city. There's no skyscrapers like Singapore, but it is a smart city, and I think it's because they are looking at solution that look into the efficient management of services, resources, always looking at new ways of integration of different kinds of technologies for the betterment or improvement of their city. So these are things, that's why there's a lot of startups there. There are a lot of new enterprises there that actually looks into all this, and it's the same in San Diego. These are things that you can read, you can Google, you can read. I encourage you to do that, because then you will realize that not everything is about tech. Some are very simple. Some are huge investment. Some are very normal budgets that you have, but solutions which are different, and all of that is because they are using data, right? I totally agree on that from the previous panel that talks about data. Data is very important, you know, and this is where once we understand that, you know, we can do all kinds of solutions, and that is why I think in all our Malaysia National Physical Plan 3, we encourage cities to actually set up their own local urban observatory so that they can collect local data. Data need to be as granular as possible so that you can actually overcome some of the issues properly. And of course, as a planner, you know, we are also looking, you know, we are always looking for new challenges, and one of it is the digital twin, where everything physical, you know, is replicated digitally, you know. But these are good tools that if you have the money, you can invest in it. But I believe that is something that can build over time. It can actually help you to do good planning and decision making, and it will make you have a city which is smarter and smarter over time. Because one of the things that I always mention is that we need to understand that whatever we do, whatever decision that we make, the life cycle of a city actually is quite important. So developing something, building something could just be a one-off cost or one-off investment. But the more expensive part is actually the operating and maintenance. And that's a lifetime cost sometimes, you know, and that's actually a bigger cost. So if our solutions are smart enough, it minimizes the impact of our resources, but it maximizes the outcomes, and also limiting the cost of maintenance and operations. I think that's a better choice in terms of what we decide in terms of being smart as well as sustainability. And I really want to emphasize again that cities must, you know, if you want to do a smart city project or you want to do a blueprint, as some of the suggestions just now, Trijaya says that they have a blueprint. They're also suggesting others should have a blueprint. But I think if you want to have a blueprint, you must understand who your stakeholders are. You must do a mapping of what your city functions are, what your issues are. And I think then only you can do your prioritization. And the best way to prioritize is, again, linking it back to a sustainability agenda. Because what we observe is that 75% of most IoT projects only concentrates on 5 SDGs, which is good health and well-being, affordable and clean energy, innovation, and sustainable cities, and consumption, responsible consumption and production. But it's not that bad also, because if you do SDG 11, you actually have a good connection to all other SDGs. In fact, you overcome almost 60 of the targets out of the 169 targets. And similarly, this is what I wanted to emphasize. You know, if you bring the smart solution and have a long-term goal to achieve sustainability, then you will see this kind of effect. You know, it's just not one outcome. It's that multiple kind of outcome. And it's similar with waste. You know, this is the waste ecosystem. It not only take care of the environment. Most of the time we focus waste taking care of the environment. But actually, waste also helps in terms of socioeconomic dimensions. You know, so it has a big ecosystem if you manage waste. You know, and especially if you bring smart city technologies into waste. And even when we are talking about COVID-19, you know, the pandemic itself, if we are looking at a solution, if we are looking at how to overcome some of the crisis, have a longer trajectory or view of how you're bringing other dimensions of sustainability into your solutions as well. Because at the end of the day, this is what it does, you know. it actually helps you to actually link as much as possible to as many SDG targets as possible. So then I would think you can say that that's a good solution. Because just now the question is, how do you know it's a good solution? How you decide what's a good solution? And I think having more outcomes, impacting more outcomes, will be when you decide it's a good solution. Because at the end of the day, I think we want to move forward, we want to move forward, when we say better living environment, and if smart is the way forward to get to sustainability, I think then adopt smart in the best manner. And I think this is where we can see what we want is to move from a typical kind of a city into a city which embrace solution in the best way, so that you have a more circular or kind of a cohesive ecosystem. So I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize, because for me, a city is only smart if it's sustainable. So I think that's, for me, is very crucial. We just cannot have a smart city program without bringing in the agenda of sustainability into the whole equation. Because at the end of the day, that's the actual goal, not the smart city goal. The actual goal is the sustainable agenda, which needs to come in very early, not as a thing that you think about later. It cannot be. It's something that must be embraced from the very beginning. So for those of you who wants to know more about what we do at the Malaysia SDG Cities, welcome to reach out to us, because this is something that we also teach cities on how to prioritize whatever projects that they do. We also want them to align all their efforts, be it low carbon, smart city, or even LA21, into a very holistic program, so that you can achieve better outcomes at the same time. So I think that's all, Cik Mazlan, from me, and welcome to discuss further.
Thank you so much, Madam. It was a very auspicious and fruitful presentation and sharing. Before I open to the participant for Q&A, maybe I have something to get from you, Madam, especially in terms of open data, big data. I think this is quite a big issue right now. Also the previous one, how to get the accurate data, to share the data, even in public sector, sometimes at level, at federal level, state level, come to local level, always having big changes, not very accurate. So, because smart city is between the, what we call between the combination between data and devices. So what do you think about this, Madam, please? Data sharing and something problem about the data sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that question also came from the other panel discussion just now. Definitely data sharing in Malaysia is a big issue. One is, of course, we are very territorial with our data. But second, our data sometimes are not regularly updated. And also the third thing is our data is not very granular, in the sense that they are not spot on to the issue that we are facing. So in the Malaysia SDG program that we are doing with local authorities, we actually encourage data that's to be collected at the local level. We also encourage different kind of attributes that could also signify the issue on the ground, you know. So that means to say not necessarily it's a formal set of data with numbers and statistics, you know, but it could just be real issues on the ground, and that's where the understanding and the input from the stakeholder become very important. The validation on the ground, you know, through that connection that you have with the local area. I think that in a way, that informality of data should be used also, you know. It should not just be everything should be used on official data. I know that sometimes we keep on insisting that it must be an official data, but over the last years that we've been working with a lot of organizations, we also realize that a lot of even huge organizations are also going for other kinds of informal information and data just to support what they're doing. So I think that, you know, we should have a more open view on what this data is all about, you know, because the real thing is the issue on the ground. If there are real poor people there and you can identify it, you know, and there's people who are poor, you know. I mean, for homeless people, for example, you can never have a data on them because they go back and then they come back, you know, and then you don't even, because you don't tag them, you don't even know whether it's the same people, you know. So it's always very difficult. But you know, you have a homeless problem, you know. So what is the real problem? The problem is homeless, or the numbers of the homeless people. Even if you have 100 or 20, you still have a homeless problem. So is the numbers more important or the problem which is more important, you know? So I find that our priorities needs to be understood as to the impact of what it does, you know, what the problem does to our city. And that's where I think informal way of getting data could be the first step towards managing the issue. Of course, once you get into the process, you know, then you go on into formalizing this information and getting more regulated data, if that's possible. But that would be some time, I think, if we get regulated data in place. But I just find that as I go around, I mean, speaking to the mayor of Surabaya, for example, you know, she's just doing it based on what the problems are on the ground. You know? But she fixed the problem. She realized that there are poor people, and she fixed the problem. You know? She gives them job as simple as the job equals 2 meals in a day. That's a simple solution, you know, because then they are no longer on the street, they are working, and they get 2 meals a day, and she fixed with a simple shelter program, you know. It's not like we always have to fix things with a very high rocket science kind of a solution.
Okay, madam. One more thing about we have been introduced this kind of initiative, smart city initiative, few years back. Okay, we have been established the understanding among the PDTs, and then now we talk about the implementation. But I just want to know the readiness of PDTs itself. Maybe for huge PDTs, they don't have any problem in terms of personnel, budget, ideas, and so. But for the small district, how they would to proceed with the smart city initiative at their local level? Please, madam.
Yeah, I think actually cities are aware that they also have issues. That's why kalau you look at what they submit sometimes as a project, smart city project, they normally replicate what other cities are doing, you know, because for them that's the easier way to do it. It's another, if one city is doing smart traffic light, they also do smart traffic light. Whether or not they need it, it's secondary, because for them it's like, okay, someone have done it, then there must be a need for it. So that's going back to capacity lah. One, capacity to understand what this agenda is all about. Second is the capacity to actually measure the needs. So yes, definitely our local government not all of them have the capacity to do this. So like even in our own Malaysia SDG program, the ones which are bigger, they are doing it on their own, but they with their funds. But the one which are smaller, we are trying to get KPKT themselves to assist the cities to actually do it. So, and then we are thinking also of combining a few of them together, so that there will be that sharing of knowledge and doing it together, so that maybe that will also help in terms of collective understanding and collective manpower to do all this prioritization. Because definitely memang like in Sabah, for example, when we started the Malaysia SDG program, definitely they do not have the capacity when we did the training. So the local government at the state level, they actually step in, and they are the one that is assisting in terms of some of the knowledge sharing and the capacity building for the small PDPs. Yes, I think that's something that is a big issue.
Thank you, Madam. I open to the floor. Is there any question from the participant? We have about 226 participants right now. Thank you so much on behalf of I-KPKT and other agencies collaborate with us. I would like to say thank you so much to all speakers, moderators, and participants for participating in our event today and tomorrow. So is there any question, please? The topic for this session is the contribution of smart cities to the achievement of SDGs. Very interesting. Please. While waiting, Madam, maybe you can elaborate something on maintenance culture among our public, government agencies, or else. Maintenance culture, I think this is quite critical and crucial, need to be give more attention to it. Please, Madam.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I understand where you're coming from. Maintenance is not only costly, but it's something that should be a shared responsibility. I think this is where, in context of sustainability partnership, which our SDG 17 is a very important SDG. So whatever you're doing, you must not be doing it alone. From the very beginning, the whole process needs to bring the people into the equation, so that they understand. I mean, sometimes you build a very smart system, and then, or actually not even smart lah. Sometimes we build a nice bench in a park. It's so nice. It's very expensive, and then we start to say that, I've seen in a situation where you're even scared to allow people to sit there, because you're worried that they might destroy it, or some kids might come and skateboard on it. Then you start to put very rough edges on it, and then suddenly it becomes very unsafe for a child to actually be near it, because you are afraid of vandalism. So on one hand, you are afraid of the maintenance that might be affecting you the end of the day. But the outcome is a design that actually is not really safe for a kid, you know, not very attractive for maybe an aging person, you know. So I think in designing some spaces and thinking about maintenance of these small things, we must always be aware that at the end of the day, who are we doing it for? So we must be very conscious about how it's being designed so that the user experience is more important. And also having that shared responsibility and awareness. I remembered when I visited one city last time, they did a sustainable urban drain, you know, and they carried out a whole campaign just to explain to people that don't throw rubbish. This is a drain, you know, or even the Masjid Ara Damansara. I find that the guards are very good, you know, they don't allow people to park illegally there, and they keep on telling people why you cannot park there, because they're actually a swale there, and it's not very strong, the structure. So they keep on saying that don't park because, but they didn't put this huge barrier, you know, like what we normally do, you know, because the minute you put barrier, people will want to do it. Because you're deterring it, then they want to do it. It's a psychology of the people, you know. So I just feel that there must be more humanizing what we are doing, you know, whether it is smart. I think it's very important, yeah, so that the maintenance issue becomes a shared responsibility for all of us, you know. I mean, that would be my personal view on that.
Thank you, Madam. Participant, do you have any question, please? Or any views, opinions, please? Just to exchange our views and opinions.
Yeah, I see a question from Cik Zul from Mike, right? What is our level of SDG implementation in Malaysia? How do we accelerate the implementation of SDG in the local authority of PBTs? Yeah, maybe I just answer Cik Mazlan. Yeah.
Okay, please, Madam, please.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, our PBTs have actually started to embrace sustainability for a very long time, because our LA21 program started in 1990, you know. So some of the local government, of course, are late starters. So maybe they started in the late 90s or early 2000s, you know. But most of them have some form of LA21 program. That's one, you know. Second, in our local plan, structure plan, because all our national plans have already started to drive the sustainable agenda. So most structure plan and local plan are already promoting that idea. So they have started, but what is lacking is actually integration. So that's actually what's not happening. That means to say integration of the program. Sorry. Yeah. So so itulah one of the things that we hope to do now is that by introducing this Malaysia SDG cities program, we are able to help them to understand to, you know, how to do the integration and how to accelerate it. Because I think they are already doing it in bits and pieces. But from our early evaluation of 6 of the PBTs that we are doing, most of them are doing more than 60% already of the SDGs, you know. But the outcome is the one that is actually not very well defined because of the targets are not very focused, and also the integration of the program doesn't allow the outcome to be well developed.
Okay, Madam. Is there any question anymore? Please. Maybe madam, under goal number 11.4, cultural and natural heritage. How do smart city can adopt and adapt in natural and in cultural and natural heritage aspect? This.
Oh, well, yeah, and now that we have a lot of technology, and if you can afford it, of course you can use because a lot of our, when you talk about especially heritage lah, especially when you talk about conservation, you can use a lot of the technology in terms of VR, virtual reality, to also assist people to understand historical areas better, the storytelling, the narratives, So I do find that in some areas where very limited access is allowed in a very protected heritage areas, they use a lot of this visualization kind of technology to assist people to actually understand the story of the area. So yeah, there are a lot of tools that could help you to visualize. So that's also interesting. And of course, culture, now you can share your culture quite easily globally, because of the accessibility of media and all kinds of platforms that has allowed you to outreach lah. But it's not the same, I guess. You eventually people do need to feel it, and this is where it's also very important to make sure that we preserve our culture and heritage. And however, in terms of outreach, yeah, definitely technologies can assist a lot in that.
Thank you so much, madam. Now we are at 4:52 p.m. All right. So I think we are at the end of the session for today. Thank you so much, Madam Town Planner, Technologist Nurliza Hashim, for your sharing, for your presentation. It was very fruitful. Before I adjourn this event, I would like to give some briefing for tomorrow. Tomorrow we have three modules more: Module 5, Module 6, and Module 7. So Module 5 is focusing on the implementation of smart city as a tool to accommodate new norms in the midst and post-COVID-19. The moderator is Director of I-KPKT, and the speakers are from Ministry of Education, Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, Islamic Consumers Association, and also from PDRM. For Module 6, it is a sharing session, identifying the right technology to implement smart city initiative, totally from Mike. They have 6 speakers. And then the last module is from BDI. Dr. Siti Muhaza Sheikh Zainal. She will explain about budget application for smart city projects and take away by her, and then the closing remarks at 12:45. So hopefully all of you enjoyed and followed this event closely. So I adjourn this event now, and we will continue tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Thank you so much.